that it should come to this. In the chaos behind your door that stood against the world, forced and fallen, and open on the loss of a life unattended and untold, and left in the guise of Ophelia before us, drowned and entering the flame. A cocoon, a blossom-strewn nirvana, and with only a familiar name, without even an echo to adhere to, or a tardy note to leave behind. Locked as a shell, rocked to and fro, the sheer flow and ebb of a tide trapped in your mind. The more you struggled, the more you were caught, while flights of angels occupied your thoughts. Is it love or anger after, which drives the self towards the end, or the simple act of just letting go? So many lives lost, and yet each irreconcilable with a past beyond repair, a future fast forward or on rewind to the end. What is it that is beyond reach or cure, or anything that this world could contend? Could it be the vacancy after joy has gone, with a to let sign forever there, or memory left as an alloy of something known and now beyond compare? Yet its loss, the colossal loss that knows the emptiness a mirror's image shows. It is the emptiness inside which kills by degrees, before the unfaceable, staring out at something unseen that wills the spirit to a last immutable flight path, and now locked on autopilot as it jettisons and shears away from its own habitation, precipitate, yet spiralling then into the unknown. The spectacular cartwheel from the sky that fell unnoticed on a busy day, without warning or any exit cry, with night coming on in the disarray, the frantic search through the locked, isolate hours, where fate had knocked already, too late. It is the world which has come to an end, its equilibrium and its orbit awry, with a malaise nothing will mend. The desperate and fallen, the spirit left to contend with a future that is not negotiable. Margaret, forlorn, succumbing alone to her last crisis, and left in her home with nowhere to turn, pleading for the time she could ill afford, forced into the only resolution, left to cry at the door of a closed ward, too afraid to ask for an admission, while booked one way for an unknown country, without any luggage for the journey. Part 2. If the right words exist, I cannot find them. Within I am as a volcano erupting, She was one of my own kind, someone of like mind, and she had to go down as a casualty of her own folly, and yet she amounted to so much more, an unexpected death alone, its consummate reality like no other. She was known to us as Margaret. Silence seemed to become her only friend at the end. With an urgency she let take over, that she might herself transcend, collaborating with a new-found mute anonymity she could not refute. Margaret, like Christine before her, became a brief episode in the theatre of sudden death in Camden, with the same internal pass-through review thereafter. Nothing was done. Nothing would ever be done. Yet the patients kept on dying by their own hand, pushed towards extremity, with nothing more to be done but to die, waiting there for help which would never come, left to beseech for a hospital bed, which for some would be permanently full. They lay abandoned in their homes instead, at the mercy of crisis teams, a cold subliminal, and as such it was done. Words break under the weight of their burden. She was left there completely overwhelmed. Her last scene, with Christine before her then, on rewind in her mind as it was filmed, that they might never be effaced again, and in the cold light of day, as the world hurried past, unstartled and unheeding on its way. Abandoned, they stood alone, with nothing left which they could call their own, except for the manner of their dying, as the slow, cold, intangible scarves curled around them, their shadows left with their name, unlit, without echo in the mind's eye, the future to measure and judge it by. There was no help forthcoming, not even hope for one more day or another hour. Everything had ground down to the time then, and silent shadows in which to cower. Mortal smoke would engulf every crevice of the slow turning locked room, with a pall impossible to see through, its soft vice the hold of low flame, as the natural day was obscured and left beyond reach or cure, with time enough then for you to fold back as a girl again, down to the core, without any meaning anymore, curled up with the end unwritten, passing through, silently leaving the world behind you. You would have read To Be or Not to Be, preparatory in a time before, pondering inevitability or accidental death behind your door. Who can say if you followed Sylvia, the first day of a week you could not face, You could quote by heart from Ophelia, and like her would vanish without a trace. And always the hours, yet you knew full well when Virginia entered the water, literary to the last, you would tell her that your death would mirror hers after. Was it a cry for help? We shall never know. A life too soon you were to sever. In your own way, you were a campaigner for justice and equality for all people. And I never heard you utter as a Pharisee. You were a loyal friend, wondering at us all to the end. You would read aloud with rapt attention. No one intruded on your narrative. Once when you read about the Indian chief who had resigned himself to fight no more and to look for his children among the dead, someone entered to then offend, a lapse in manners you could not forgive. Blaming the staff for Christine's death and none other, you would follow in her shadow. In the countdown to the end, there was no time to draw from or to turn about in, suddenly overtaken and as though mutely diminished in the clamouring, as you just gave in to necessity for nothing, while trying to imagine what it was you knew. The transparency of smoke welled within, slowly dissolving the real thing, trapped there before time after, parrying as Hamlet with your own name, while you invoked angels for an answer, and left to be or not to be in vain. Lured unsuspecting to the terminal silence of the end beyond your last call. The stories abound, but the crisis team came to your door first thing in the morning, and they found it closed. This could only mean that you were out or heavily sleeping. It took the rest of the day for something to happen, and by that time you had passed away. The rest of the day unfolding in the nightmare narrative of your last stand. The police were to break down your door at 4 on a storm-laden afternoon, just a month into 63, and your voice as a poet just beginning, soon to be heard, not as a muted echo, but as Margaret, someone we used to know.